Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Winchesters. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, there's the whole situation where the team comes across a scene, following the trail after Samuel. And there's a whole bunch of dead zombies, which immediately I was like, Sam and Dean had to cross paths with zombies, but it couldn't have been that frequent, because I don't remember. Because there's certain things like, well, plenty of times they ran into vampires. Plenty of times they ran into, like, witches and werewolves, like your typical special, trifecta. So, like, there's a lot of those that they ran into multiple times. I feel like they only had to run into zombies, like, a handful of times, if at all. Because I'm like, I'm struggling to remember when they actually ran into zombies. I think I brought it up last episode, but like I do not remember everything from Supernatural. I feel like I remember probably like I put myself at maybe 70% of Supernatural. Like I still feel like there's like a 30% block. Might even be 40% for all I know. Block is in like blank is what I meant to say, not instead of block. So I don't remember them ever crossing paths with zombies, but I would assume they'd have to. In 15 years they had to have like crossed paths with the zombie. So thought that was kind of an interesting encounter. I do love the recurring bit where like John is covered in first zombie goop and then like was it Latunda goo at the very end of the episode. So it's like, cool. You got splatter and you got some of it in your mouth twice. But even I thought it was super suspicious of like, it's one of those things where it's like, this is a little too convenient. I mean, because Mary was reading too much into it. She was saying like, right, the fact is, here's one of my dad's shells. It even has his signature on it. And he left this message for us. But that's the thing, like, Carlos even brought it up. Like, if he was really like trying to like leave a message for you, why wouldn't he stick around? Like, why leave something so ambiguous? And then also like, point you towards a case. But she was like, no, this is what's happening. And I think it's so interesting. Like, the fact is that Mary's so gung-ho, like, okay, let's follow my father's footsteps. And Carlos is like, no, like, what about the rest of us? She's like, you can come along or not. So she's very like, my dad knows what he's doing. So she believes in her dad so much that she's like full speed ahead. But Carlos is like, let's take a second to see if there's not something else going on here. Your dad wants us to take a case, but it's like, what about the Akrita? And I think that's such an interesting thing because I feel like that's a very Dean thing to do because Dean was the one that was very much like, I mean, he kind of had no choice because he was the one left behind by Sam when Sam went off to college. So like Dean was the one that was like left behind to like kind of like following their father's footsteps a lot. Sam kind of rebelled. So it's like, in this case, like in this particular episode, Mary's a little more like Dean. John's a little bit more like Sam, especially because when Ada talked to his mom, she had brought up the fact is, unlike, John's dad, what's his name, Arthur? It's like he was not very open, but John is. And I think I might even say that last episode. It's like, oh, that's so ironic, considering we know John wasn't the most open person. I mean, the few times we spent with him, he wasn't very good at sharing his feelings. Once again, a bad habit his son ended up adopting. The son that ended up spending, like, kind of being around him the most, the one that kind of followed him through thick and thin, not the one that rebelled against him in the case of Sam. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But I think it's probably like, yeah, Mary's death probably sent him over the edge, and he became hardened. He probably buried a lot of stuff. That was like that's who he needed to be to find a way through, because he was dead set on his revenge. He was stuck raising 2 kids on his own. That was the best he could make of it. But I think it just had. It just sadly played out the way it did with, and the complicated relationships that Sam and Dean ultimately ended up having with their father. Because John himself was kind of at odds with his mom, because his mom was like, you've been going a week and you didn't call me. But he's like, that's not part of our arrangement. She's like, I need to know that you're coming home and that you're okay. I didn't hear a word from you. Like, when I heard someone calling, although who it was Betty looking for you. And I'm like, they're assuming like, oh, Betty must be an ex or something. I'm like, I'm curious what that is about, because we never got an answer to that this episode. But for her, it's like you walking out and disappearing on me. She's like, all I have left to remember of your father, it's all compiled in one box. She's like, and when it's all said and done, it's that all I'm going to have left of you. And John, and that ends up being a main through line this episode, is that John interprets that as like, oh, my mom doesn't believe in me and stuff like that. I wish she'd get off my back. He's like, because he wants to believe that he can do this, but he also kind of doesn't believe in himself. It's like, man, I can't do this. But Mary's like, no, it's going to take some time. You're going to find your way through this. It's like, right, being a Marine didn't come to you naturally. You had to like take time, train to get where you are. It's like that's how this works, you know? I mean, Mary at the very least, and the others, I mean, even Lotta's still like, yeah, she's got the knowledge, but even she's like never been out in the field until like last episode. Carlos and Mary had the most experience, but even Mary, it's like, yeah, even more so because her dad's trained her ever since she was a little kid, you know? Which is, once again, even more ironic considering she went out of this life, very much like her future son. Well, one of her future sons would. And speaking of his mom, Millie, I don't know if that's going to be like short for like Millicent or something like that. Unless it's like short for like Amelia or something. Either way, Ada obviously knew her husband a little bit more just because like them working together. But, she also points out like, oh yeah, there's these plants growing out front. It's like, yeah, they're jasmine and they're meant to bring protection. So it's like, yeah, he probably never told, probably didn't want to worry her, but he probably purposely never told Millie what those plants actually represent. And so it's probably like kept a lot of supernatural stuff at bay so that it's never found its way there. That even if he's away and even if he's going, like, obviously he wasn't hoping on being dead, but he was probably like, anytime I'm away, I can make sure that my wife and my son are okay while I'm going. So that's what the jasmine represents. So it's probably has kept like some supernatural stuff at bay over the years. But the main crux of this episode takes place at a commune in Topeka where, first and foremost, I thought the commune would be like a little more involved in the episode. I mean, truth be told, it's like, it's even back in the original Supernatural, it was like very rarely that their undercover stuff would, and from time to time would become like a main part of the episode, especially with the people they'd be working with in those respective episodes. But I mean, so like the commune ended up being like such, obviously it's like just a set piece of the episode. But I thought it was going to be more culty than it was. But I mean, it's like, nah, I don't know why, because I guess I associate like a commune, the 70s, I immediately think cult. But I'm like, no, I should be thinking like, oh, peace and love, man. Like, it's like the hippiest. I mean, and even Carlos is like super excited about this. So he's like, oh my God, yes, we're going to a commune. And I love that he busts into a song and it's him and Lotta doing a duet. And he's like, okay, this is a solo part. Let me do my thing. And he does it. I thought that was neat. But also I love, it's like, once again, like I brought up last episode, that nostalgia hits you where it's like, oh yeah, hear them with fake IDs and stuff. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, like cause Sam and Dean's main way around that was always being cops. And I was like, oh yeah, it's like, I think that it's very rare occasions where they had to be someone other than cops. It came up from time to time, but it was mainly like no, we're cops. It gave you the best access to the crime scene and stuff, but I guess like faking like, federal credentials. I mean, who knows? They might do that in the beginning, but like that was a major part of Sam and Dean's operations. Like, I mean, especially because Bobby like helped set a lot of that the networking up for that. Like, so I don't know how like whether a lot of hunters utilize that, but that was mainly Sam and Dean's thing. Was like the FBI. The police angle. So I thought that was kind of specifically it was the FBI. So it's interesting, like Mary and John getting like, he's like, yeah, I more prefer the punchy part, but it's like, yeah, the kind of being undercover part does come up from time to time. So I just thought that was kind of neat. It kind of got thrown into the deep end of like, right, when they were talking to Barry's dad, and then when they showed up at the commune. But the main monster this episode is a creature that mimics people, specifically people you kind of have issues with, specifically parents. And so at first they're like, right, so what are we dealing with? A shapeshifter? But it's like, there's a ton of shapeshifters, which I was immediately like, I don't think, once again, I'm comparing and contrast just because I'm like, I don't think Sam and Dean felt a lot of different shapeshifters. They mainly only fought shifters. I mean, I guess, because, I mean, truth be told, I mean, it's a different category, but I mean, I think they're not considered like under the shapeshifter category, but like, I mean, truth be told, it's werewolves are shapeshifters, but those are two separate categories, I think. But they reference a mimic this episode. I was like, did they, once again, I was like, have they fought mimics before? Because them killing something with copper, because that's what mimics' weaknesses are. I'm like, that seems familiar. But I mean, God, who knows? Like, there's probably other supernatural things that are like weak to copper too. But I was like, because the moment they were like mimic, I was like, oh, but does a mimic really fit like the tree aesthetic thing going on? They probably missed a lot of those details because the people were like, oh my God, like this monster attack, that's all they focused on rather than the plant details, because that probably would have like made it a little easier. But also Mary wasn't really thinking straight. She was just like, she even admits later on, she was in such a rush to end this case because she's like, oh, I thought my dad would be here. All right, let's get this case over with and done with. And she kind of rushed it, and she didn't listen to Lotta when Lotta would brought up like, these plants and this sap, it's not blood, it's green, dark greenish sap. And it's like, oh, maybe, and these flowers being left behind. She actually went to Ada and kind of got some advice about what they might be. So got the right book and found out about it being Latuna and not an actual mimic. But once again, Mary's kind of in almost dictator mode rather than democratic mode. And rather than this being a democracy, it's more of a dictatorship. But that's also because like her dad kind of ran things that way. To be fair, it's like in retrospect, it's kind of like, well, the little bit we got to spin with Sam and Samuel and Supernatural was like, he was kind of like that to my extent. Like, he was just kind of doing his own thing and never really told anyone else what the full plan was. I think he's very stuck in his own ways. So, and Mary's kind of like that too. But it's also like, she feels like, yeah, my dad's the best. And Carlos is like, you need to take him off this pedestal you have him on. That the fact is that, he has his faults and everything too. Or you got to figure out who you want to be as a hunter, like leader of a group, because you're going to lead things very differently than your dad, because your dad's way of doing things isn't always the best way of just kind of like, it's my way or the highway approach. And I guess it's like, considering you were raised under that, you're not going to like break away from that. Plus your dad's really good at what he does, makes you really good at what you're doing. So obviously you're going to want to like follow his teachings to the letter. But it's like, right, you got to kind of find your own way through it, kind of find your own ebb and flow. Because also like, because her dad's all about kind of handling things his own way, but it's like, right, we're here, we're a team, we got your back, so let's figure it out together. When Latunda did show up, I was like, as John's mom, I was like, oh my God, obviously it's Latunda. But then I was like, maybe not. I was like, maybe the twist is going to be, we're going to think it's not his mom when in actuality it is his mom. But then the way she was talking in her cadence, I was like, and the way she was just kind of like, oh no, like the way she was kind of saying like, cause she was pushing like there was no like concern in her voice. It was more so like she was kind of blaming him, being like, oh no, you know that this isn't about me or your friends. This is about you. About your father, you being angry at him because he didn't believe in you. And saying all that, I was like, okay, this is Latunda. And then she messed up by being like, yeah, Mary and stuff like that. And it's like, cool. I never told you about Samuel, nor did I tell you about Mary. Because he talked to his mom for a little bit. And because he immediately stormed off, so they didn't have a chance to talk. And he tries to attack Latunda, and she's like, oh, but also I'm not a mimic, so yeah. Because her whole thing is like, she's able to read your mind. I missed some of the details about what her circumstances were, but apparently she was like an abusive mother about, being about disobedient children. And I think, wasn't the whole thing of, she basically fed off of them, and eventually people caught her and killed her, and well, basically trapped her and made her into what she is now. And so she captures disobedient children, drags them under, and then feeds on them. Side note, I thought Barry was done for. I was like, obviously John's trying to get, what's his face, Clyde away, and I was like, oh man, Barry's dead. But it's like, oh no, Barry's good. But I'm like, well, how do we know she didn't plant something in him beforehand? So there might be some residual stuff, but it seemed like, nah, they didn't focus on it. So I was like, okay, so maybe Barry's okay. Maybe she was torturing, maybe she got distracted before she could like kill him. She wasn't because it probably wasn't like, she wasn't going to kill him yet. Because she kind of feeds over them over the course of months. Plus she had 3 bodies, so she was probably going to take her time. It was more so like tenderizing you by like hurting you a little bit. I do always think it's interesting when you use a part of like the monster or whatever to kill it. Like, it's like a great example I use. It's interesting connection too. It's like I was thinking of the boys from season 2. That acid guy in that was it episode 6 who like vomits that acid on and burns people, but he vomits it on himself and it kills him. It's like, oh yeah, you're not immune to your own thing. So like, right, the way to kill her is to pierce her heart with magic. Oh, her leg is made of magic, so they basically use that against her. Mary stabs her in the heart with it. So I just thought I always liked that. And obviously, if you don't know why I reference saying like, oh, there's a direct connection there, just in case you didn't know, Eric Kripke, the creator of Supernatural, and he was the showrunner for like seasons 1 through 5. Also is I think he's a showrunner on The Boys as well. I know he's a creator of I know he's like the one who adapted the show, the comic into the show, but I don't know if he's like, I think he's considered the showrunner. I think he's still like the showrunner of it and stuff like that. But either way, it just immediately made me think of that. That's just an example of like, oh yeah, your powers being you not having immunity to your own thing. But luckily everyone kind of gained a lesson from this episode. Obviously Mary learned to be like, right, listen to the rest of the team, not be in such a rush to track down her dad. John learned more so that, right, he recognizes, oh, I wasn't mad at you, Mom. I did what I've always done. When I was mad at Dad, but you're here and I could easily take my frustrations out on you. So he's like, I did what I normally do because Dad wasn't here for me to get frustrated at. I took it out on you. And he's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, but do know at the end of the day, I do believe in you. Because she says that her and John's dad had this whole thing of, it's almost like a don't go to bed angry thing. Like, no matter how much we fight, the point is to always find a way to tell each other we love each other. But the last day that she saw John's dad, they didn't say that to each other. They never found a way to get to that point after having a big fight. And that's something she's kind of sadly got to live with, you know? And so she's like, you and me will never make that mistake. No matter where you go, you will always be my baby. And I know you got to do this, but no, wherever you go, whatever happens, I will always love you. And it's like, I love you too, Mom. So I thought that was beautiful. But I think this was also an important aspect for Lotta too, for her to recognize, like, right, I need to kind of be a little more assertive, kind of stand up for herself a little bit, because she was sure about it. And it's like, right, trust your instincts. I'm like, there's got to be something more to this, because it totally turned out to be the case. So, but also Barry got returned to his dad. I mean, what was his face? I keep forgetting his name. Clyde, his whole circumstances, his issue was with a mother figure, and that was like a sister from the church or whatever, like at the orphanage he was in. So, but at least Barry made up with his dad, and I think that was nice, and I think that really meant a lot. This was also that thing of, man, that's actually pretty dope, because it's like, cool, the two people that got kidnapped survive. As we've learned as we all know far too well, that doesn't always happen. Not every victim that was taken in the episode survived. Obviously, a big thing about this show, and something, once again, it's like, it feels like I said, it's almost getting reintroduced to the world again. It's got to remind myself, it's like, right, these shows typically open with a depressing thing of someone getting super murdered. Luckily, Barry survived, but yeah, that's super, because a lot of times it's like, oh, that person was taken at the beginning of the episode. Like, if anything, Clyde would have been the only other one to survive, and Barry would have actually ended up dead. But they're like, oh, no, Barry's still alive. I'm like, oh, wow, that worked out. That's great. That's awesome, So, but it's like, yeah, that's not always going to be the case. And I think that's going to be a sad and very important lesson for them to learn, that it is the hard part of being a hunter. You cannot save everyone. Once again, even like that was even with everything at their disposal, even with the world being where it was during Sam and Dean's time throughout the 15 years of Supernatural, this is even further in the past. They super won't be able to save everyone, especially because the box they used to kill the demon, like last episode, I don't know whether maybe it has a certain time frame, or like maybe it can only be used every once in a while, because it's like a MacGuffin that it's like, okay, it's like the Colt. It's like, yeah, that initially had very, very limited ammunition, so you had to make the shots count. They found a way around that later, because they manufactured, I can't remember. I think didn't they have to manufacture, like, they had to make special bullets for it. So, or was it that eventually made it so that even regular bullets could work in it? I don't remember how the Colt situation. I definitely remember they ran out of ammo for it, because, like I said, it was like very specifically made ammo, and I don't remember if they could just use any ammo later, or was it just they had to specifically craft it themselves. Because it's like, yeah, that's like a early-ish Supernatural, because I don't remember when the cult finally, like, when that, because didn't the cult get destroyed or something? The same thing for the demon knife. Like, I don't remember whatever, like, didn't they still have that at, like, the end of the, throughout a good chunk of the show? I don't remember off the top of my head. Like, I'm fairly certain the cult got destroyed, but I don't actually remember. And like I said, that was like decently early Supernatural. That was still like in the, probably like the early-ish seasons, probably anywhere between 1 to 5, but maybe it still came up even later, and I just don't remember. Once again, I will not, do correct me in the comments down below, because I will not remember everything. I do not have an encyclopedic knowledge of anything in general, but definitely not Supernatural. I'll remember certain things here and there, but not everything. So, once again, do correct me if I say anything incorrect, which I will all the time, so you'll have to be doing a lot of correcting, sorry. Either way, we had the whole thing with Ada, when she was doing, like, you know, tasting, like, she was, performing that, thing, you know, drinking that tea or whatever, and I was like, I thought what she was doing is she took the jasmine, and I thought what she was going to do is, like, apply that to what she was drinking, and that way, she taps into some stuff tied to John's dad or something like that. I thought that's what she was doing, but no, she was tapping into, like, her subconscious of what was left, what was ingrained in her when that demon had her possessed last episode. I was like, oh, that's, and even Mary's like, oh, that sounds horrifying. It's like, yeah, that's pretty rough. But, basically she took whatever notes she could remember from it possessing her, whatever it knew, because it had to know the demon that they ended up killing, so... Or rather, that came attacking them, so it's like, right, it has to be connected to the Akrita, which I'm assuming that's it at the end of the episode with all those other things. That was like a large number of, and that was like a large number of monsters with it. But it seems like it's the one that set Mary and the team on that path. It needed a Tunda dead, because I guess it's almost like I'd assume it's almost kind of like the seals to Lucifer's cage. Like, you know, you had to break, like, when it's 66 of the 666 seals, you had to break them, and I think that's the thing of, like, right, they're probably gathering ingredients, and it seems like, oh, you needed Latunda's soul or something from it, because it's like, I can only, or maybe it's magical energy. So it's probably going to use Samuel as either it already has Samuel and it's using him as this bait to draw the team into doing the jobs it needs them to, or Sam is off on its own looking for the Akrita, and they think they're following his trail, because, I mean, it's probably it's just like John did with the kids. Like, John kept his distance. Even when the kids were nearby, like, he would never let them know what he was up to, because he is like, right, he was doing his own thing, and he wanted them to follow their own path. I don't remember if John was doing everything for them to eventually find him, or was he just being like, no, I can't let them find me yet until I do what I need to do, or was it more so like a, no, I don't want them to find me at all, because I feel like Samuel might be down the path of, I don't want you to find me at all, that's why I'm not actually leaving any trails for you to find me, because as we know, Samuel's kind of stubborn and is going to handle things his way and on his own. I don't know, we'll see how that all plays out, but it seems like that might be a thing of, like, the Akrita might be gathering ingredients. Not unless that's not the Akrita, not unless that's something else, but they set the Akrita up to be the main antagonist, so I can only assume that's that, and it's playing its... Because, I mean, obviously a lot of monsters, like powerful ones in particular in this universe, they plan. They're not just driven by, like, some subconscious instinct of, like, right, you fit the need of, like, the fit whatever need I as a monster or whatever supernatural being I am, I need. Like, there are certain ones that are obviously, like, smart enough that have their own plan. Obviously, those are the big bosses of the supernatural universe. Like, obviously, the respective main antagonists of every season of Supernatural, you know? So the Akrita feels obviously, like, on that level. So, once again, because this is a prequel, I don't think we're ever going to get anything crazy ridiculous as, well, you know, God being the main, I mean, it's like, well, of course, like, God would be, like, the main antagonist, the end-all, be-all, but you know what I'm saying, like, you know, like, oh, God's sister, darkness, which is actually kind of crazy to think about, like, the time frame between it. It's like, oh, God became the main antagonist at the end of season 14, his sister was a main antagonist all throughout season 11, So my point is, like, I don't think we're going to get anything to those massive scales, but it's probably going to be something like on the bigger scale, but not like to that. That's like, obviously, once again, that's, you kind of don't get any higher than God on that scale, you know? So it's like, but it's probably not going to be anything of that ilk that they're going to go up against. It's just probably going to be like some smart monsters that, I mean, once they're dealt with, that's why, oh, this is why Sam and Dean never had to cross paths with this potential. Maybe it's like an eldritch terror or something like that, you know? So, that type of deal. Either way, I'm very, very excited to ultimately see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.